Good morning, this is E.T. in sunny Australia after a few days of lovely spring, autumn rains, which is good for our gardens, and this is a great day for democracy. Coopracy, which works with the nature of things, not against it, does not take advantage of things like corporate politics has done. In fact, it basically over a number of years reduces the need for politicians altogether and takes away the power of the government over the people. And it is, if you like, in cooperation with what the central banks are doing. Trying to fight the most powerful organisation in the world does not make sense, but working with it and educating it, and it working with the people, not against them, like politicians are, then the world can advance. Then we don't have a totalitarian system. Because that's what the left in politics are doing, creating a totalitarian system where you obey the orders of the political elite. And it goes against humanity, and it goes against thousands of years of democratic progress. So it's time to put a stop to this and think outside of the square when it comes to how we go from here. So I'll try to read a few words the best I can, try to illustrate the ideas that underline or found the new way of thinking about democracy, which will become to be known as Coopracy. When society no longer needs priests, their lawyers and accountants make no money, at last is achieved ultimate aim of civilization and brought democracy to its higher value. Of course, that is on another planet in a faraway distant galaxy. We're not there yet. Coopracy is about reforming the bad math pathology that has caused the degradation of the fiscal and financial structures of democracies, so they've got the massive deficits they have and endangering the security of whole nations by causing internal turmoil and insecurity in that. And politicians have been involved in this. They're the ones who make the rules. People blame central banks, but politicians are the ones who make the legislation. It's up to them to stand as men and stand up for what their principles are, not be easily bought, which they have been, unfortunately, which has brought an end to the Republican Party as a useful member of the nations of the world in democracies. By simply altering the way we use words, the word pension, ditch it as a word, get rid of it, move it on, move on the word retirement. Who retires? What is retirement? Because we no longer are employed as a slave or a work serf, we're retired? No, we go and enjoy our lives. People don't retire to bed. They're still fit, they enjoy themselves as much as possible. It's a post-employment life. These change the words, changes the whole philosophy in regards to how the fiscal structure can be managed for the future of the commonwealth of the people. If you have an infinitely flexible arrangement of mythology, it initiates a quantum change in fiscal economic paradigm and improvement of natural capital incentive according to the times we're in. Politicians right now are 30 years behind the times. They're many more years, are centuries behind the times, and regressing society intellectually backwards as fast as the speed of light. Spend billions on universities and creating people who can't think for themselves or solve problems is a catastrophe waiting to happen, and those people can be used by the left as weapons against society for political reasons. Instead of banking its income as a Commonwealth, Australia for instance, their politicians have risked the value of everyone's pensions or retirement funds in any number of ways. They have interfered in the market, in housing, and in energy, in healthcare costs, in many other costs, where they worked against the benefit of the Commonwealth for their mates in associations, in what you call fiscal cartels. They've created a conflict of interests, so each election now they can no longer act for the people, but basically divert the attention of the people by creating diversionary arguments over things that make no difference to the fact the deficit shall grow beyond their capacity to alter that, and they cannot stop under the present system the structural deficit that shall manifest itself and create massive poverty the way they're going. If we take into account the inflationary to deficit factor of negative gearing or housing inflation, they say inflation is flat at the moment on the news. That's not true. The inflation in deficit, that the growth in debt and money we borrowed, that's the real inflation. If we counter that and say, well, if that inflation was in the economy, then the economy was booming, the more we borrow, the more that side of the ledger is inflated, the less the economy can move, and less currency can be moved through the economy. So therefore, it's just media spin. How inflation or words are used is media spin. That's all it is. It does not relate to the truth. We can easily see in Australia how the negative gearing system, which gives tax deductions for when people invest in houses, and this is the greatest rot in history, politicians are directly interfering in the housing market. It distorts the whole thing, and therefore they have a conflict of interest when they vote on these things. They shouldn't be voting on this at all. Should be getting rid of it, because it's becoming an embarrassment to them, and it will become more so in the coming while. Truly an embarrassment to all politicians involved in this, because states and councils in Australia in particular work with developers and other people, to the banks and financial agents and real estate agents, their mates, to inflate the price of houses, because they're all then involved in negative gearing, and none of them earn a bean for the Commonwealth. They suck money out of the Commonwealth, out of all the people working hard and all the investments in productive systems. They suck all this like a black hole, so they can get more and more wealth, and they continue. It then exponentializes, because they're involved within it explicitly and socially, and therefore there's in Australia in particular needs an investigation, a public investigation, in how councils and state governments have interfered in the housing market for the benefit of themselves and their associates. No matter how it spreads through the community, that is a guise. Like hiding trees in a wood. There's rotten trees in a wood, you can't find them because they're surrounded now by a forest. That's what these politicians have done. The fiscal and economic format established through self-interested politicians buying votes is termed bad math or anti-social math. They've established this as a pathology enough into the community so politicians of all sides can rely upon enough voter support and play around the edges each election while avoiding the focus required to begin to restore fiscal and economic equilibrium. They call returning to surplus. Within a system of diminishing returns they continue to use, this ensures reducing deficits structurally is actually mathematically and economically impossible. Australia, like many other democracies, need a holistic rethink in regards to the future of how it creates its fiscal finances. based in rational, objective and impartial honesty, founded in simple moral principles, so it is beyond the machinations of corporate politics and the leftist lies about equality. You cannot join the left unless you're capable of telling lies. Because it doesn't go across the board, but that's what it attracts to itself. Because it needs to lie to continue to grow its voter support. Because it's created an intellectual deficit through sending through people through universities not to be educated but to be brainwashed. That's a great shame. Society is regressing. We used to have an enlightenment, now they've got darkenment. And the politics plays within the paradigm created and takes advantage of it and fills with voters' minds, because most of them unfortunately do not take the time or haven't taken the time to understand the history of democracy, history of economics and fiscal systems to relate that to the present. And unfortunately that's going to be to most of the people's detriment regardless who they vote for. So I'm going to keep this short and continue this in other videos, so I don't take too much time on YouTube. By having a national savings plan, it allows for a return to common sense when it comes to post-employment income. Post-employment income. Forget the word retirement. It's a political word that needs to be ditched, dumped, got rid of. Forget the word retirement and pension. Get rid of the Roman ideas. Bring us into the 21st century. We're not serfs to the system anymore. We're free and liberated people. We don't live to work. We live for life. Those who want to live to work, up to them, good on them. But those who like the idea that life is about leisure and work and a balance may see things differently to those who would enslave people till they die, which the Liberal Party in Australia would love to see happen, so it doesn't have to pay out its pensions. We need to have flexible social income systems pertinent to the type of employment and human being involved, so the economic format in regards to post-employment living becomes to be based in a far more just form of equality. At the same time, gradually frees people up from the bondage of 40-hour week within tedious and physically demanding employments. Mixed, because people sit in traffic jams now, they're working a 16-hour day, or being involved in employment for 16-hour day, neglecting their families, and they say that's economic progress and you're getting wealthier. Is it really? They're having a joke. Keep repeating you're getting wealthier, people believe it. Actually reducing the amount of hours they have for their leisure must make people more poor in other ways, in a moral sense. If you mix this new ideas with a differentiated housing strategy, this automatically reduces traffic and work-related costs and automatically increases potential for employment. In other words, regardless how rich cities are and regardless of the value of real estate in cities, unless it caters within the complex of these high-rises for a portion of people who work in services in good quality accommodation, then it makes the cities more and more expensive. Eventually they become a decadent place and it degrades the old economic system, because cities are very, very expensive. They're the most expensive part of the whole of nations, and they cost the most to run. And having all these people living off the fiscal system or rents and real estate, living in these expensive high-rises, are not contributing that much more other than a financial explosion in their favour within the system. They're actually like a black hole on the system. So cities have got to be rethought. So people like nurses and police and all these people who do the good work, what keeps cities civilized and clean and tidy, need to live within the vicinities of cities, so they reduces the amount of hours they travel to work, and also this allows the expansion of employment of them as we go into the future. And in the coming while I will explain more and more the details of this new philosophy Coopracy is, which works with central banks to reduce the power of corporate politicians and give the power back to the ordinary people over a 3 or 4 generation time span. So this is not a revolution, it's a gradual evolution into a more leisurely system where leisure becomes a capital for those people who can't be millionaires. Not everyone can be a millionaire, but we can aspire to earn something and be involved. At the moment the system makes sure more and more people cannot be involved because there's more and more rules and regulations, more restrictions on people's movements and freedoms by the Commonwealth of Australia in particular, by the government. This is a very restrictive country, Australia, and because of this they can't think out of the box, and no matter how what they say this election, they're not doing much towards the future of the people. And in the coming while I shall explain how Coopracy works more and more for the benefit of the majority of the people. Thank you. This is E.T. from beautiful, sunny Bushland, Australia.